So good to be with you here today. Let me see if I can get this thing working. There we go. There's my logo. Okay. Well, I hope things are going well with everybody. I'm not Shane, obviously. I think I'm better looking than Shane. And do we get an amen on that? Thank you very much. Thanks, Bill. I was talking to Shane beginning of the summer. We were both down at Camp Senior High Week together. And I've learned one thing, back for all the years that I directed, that to preach on the Sunday after I've directed a week at camp has always been a bad idea. So I was talking to Shane. I said, look, the week that you direct, I'll come preach for you. And he quickly said, sure, that'd be great. Now, we didn't realize that he would be home under quarantine because of the week they had at camp. But I'm glad it all worked out. And we've got one more week at camp. And I guess I would ask you just to be praying about camp this week. It's probably the biggest week as far as the number of campers going. And hopefully they'll be able to get through the 1 week there. So it's been an interesting year and a half in everyone's lives. And we could all tell some stories. And really with this pandemic, it's affected everyone on every level. And some people worse than others. And it's been interesting is the word I'll use. It's just been interesting. And many of us have lost loved ones. Many of us have seen loved ones get seriously ill. Many of us have gotten the virus, and it's been tough on a lot of people. And as far as churches go, it's been very difficult on churches too. And as far as leaders in churches, it's been very exhausting. Whether you're ministers, elders, deacons, it's been tough. And one thing through all this, we know God is in control, and we have to continue to remember that God is in control. Now, at Christian Family Services, it was pretty interesting for us too. And I remember, when it all happened, it was March 23rd. It was a Monday, sent all my social workers working remote and the counselors home working remote. And it was, the past couple years with the counselors, we've talked about we probably need to start looking at this virtual counseling where you pop open your computer and I always got a response, no way, we're not doing that. So then it was January of 2020. I said, no, we've really got to look at this. And so then, again, I got another, I said, no. Then I said, as the executive director, no, we need to research this. Well, we didn't even start researching it yet. And then the pandemic came. And so on March 23rd, we turned on a dime. Everything was done virtually. And then our social workers, everything was done remotely for them also. And I am very proud of our staff and the way the CFS staff has handled that. And with our social services, with our Connect Care program, and with our adoptions and with pregnancy support, they have done a great job. And in the social services, I guess I'll say the numbers have gone down. And as one of our foster families leaves the auditorium here, let's give a thank you to them. And incidentally, let me just say, we have 3 families from this church that are foster families. The Ayers, the Reidelbergers, and I'm not saying the word right, I've not met them yet, but the who? Yes, that one. Are the V, it starts with a V, right? Are the V's here today? Okay, so I just want to say, that is great. That's the most foster families we've had from this church probably since I've been at CFS, and I've been there for 14 years, maybe 14 or 15, somewhere around there. And I just commend you as a church for that. Karen Shaw was a board member, and boy, we're going to miss her. And she's in Little Rock, Arkansas. But just I'm excited, and again, thank you, O'Fallon Church, for your support, and then especially with our 3 families that are foster families from this church. We really appreciate that. Okay, I was back talking about the pandemic and the social workers. Okay, and so it's been very interesting because when this first started, we were not, because everyone was a stay-at-home order, and so we were trying to reach out to our families, but we couldn't reach out the way we used to. And so one of the things that our social workers did daily, I would say, is they did some what we called emergency drops. Because of needing to have social distancing, we couldn't meet with them, but they would call and we would get diapers, wipes, even food, and take it over and just put it on their porch, and they would come and get it from their porch. Because if you remember back when this first started, they weren't allowing children to go into the grocery stores. Well, what's a mother supposed to do, a single mom? And so we've had to do that. We had some food drives. We had a diaper drive, and we still have some diapers from our diaper drive. And so many churches, you all included, really stepped up to the plate and just really helped us with that. So with our social services, with Connect Care, adoption, the numbers have been lower, but the services have just been different. And then but now with the counseling, that has almost doubled since 2018. It went up 60% in 2020 to 2018, and then this year our numbers are about 1,000 sessions over in the first 6 months what we did last year. And it's just and we also have people on a waiting list. About 2 weeks ago, we had several of our office workers were home sick, not with a virus but something else. And so I had to answer the phone a lot, so I didn't get a lot of work done. But in 2 days, I had to tell 16 people that we'd have to put them on a waiting list because all of our counselors are booked. And I just really don't like doing that. But that's what we've had to do. We've hired more counselors over the last couple of years, and we're maxed out right now with that. We're trying to do some different things so that we can hire another. But anyway, our counseling, again, with our counseling, we will counsel regardless of whether you can pay or not. So we are able to serve the underserved, and also we still do insurance. So our counseling program is going very well. I ask you to pray for our counselors. They're exhausted. We had a meeting on Friday afternoon with our counselors, and I am seeing, in fact, I told them, I said, what I have seen in just my own counseling that I have done, that a lot of the helping profession, for the past year and a half, they've just kind of put their nose to the grind, has been going to serving, and just in the last couple of months, they've kind of raised up and they're exhausted. And that I've counseled a lot of ministers and youth ministers all over the country, and I've seen it there. And then my wife is a nurse, and she's talked about with some of the nurses and doctors that she works with, and just with the helping profession, I've just seen a big impact on them and everyone. I think everybody's, especially with this new variant, people are just exhausted with this whole thing. And again, we have to I'm not telling you anything new, I'm sure, and we just have to just rely on God and just let God work with us. So as far as CFS, we are doing very well, and quite frankly, in 2020, we probably had the best year financially that we'd ever had. And so again, churches and individuals have come through and just really helping us with that. So CFS is doing well, and we're serving the children and the families in the St. Louis area, and we continue to do that, and your prayers are appreciated for that. It's been very good. Appreciate the scripture reading this morning, and just Colossians 3:17. Whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Now, I want to talk today, the title of my sermon is The Butterfly Effect. There was a man, Edward Lorenz, he coined the term butterfly effect, and it comes from what he called the chaos theory. Back in 1963, he was at a science, a conference with a bunch of scientists, and he had been doing some research, and came up with a theory now it's called the butterfly effect. And this was a theory, this hypothesis that he presented to the New York Academy of Sciences, that a butterfly could flap its wings and set molecules of air in motion, which would move other molecules of air, in turn moving more molecules of air, in turn moving more molecules of air, eventually capable of starting a hurricane on the other side of the planet. Okay, I'm not a scientist. I don't come close to being a scientist. The closest thing I am to a scientist is I've got a son who majored in biochemistry. That's about as close as I come. And I have a wife that's a nurse, and so I learned a little bit of science too when she was going through nursing school, but I am not a scientist, so I can't explain any of that. But as you probably would guess, the scientists in that conference in 1963 kind of laughed him off the stage and thought he was just a little bit crazy. And so then it's a cool thought about what we do can cause another thing, causing another thing, causing another thing. And there's been movies. I think there's a movie called The Butterfly Effect. I've not seen it, so I won't recommend it. But it's an interesting concept. But then in 1993, 30 years later, a bunch of scientists that were studying in several universities got together, and they decided they were going to test this hypothesis. And sure enough, they tested the hypothesis and came to the conclusion that it was viable and that it was something that was authentic and accurate. And this became known as the law of sensitive dependence upon initial conditions. Okay, again, I'm not a scientist, but we have the law of gravity, and so here's another one, the law of sensitive dependence upon initial conditions. And again, I see that daily in things that go on. And in God's kingdom, that law is pretty powerful. Basically, there is nothing you do that is small. Anything you do, God will take and bless it to where it goes on and on. In April 4th, 2004, April 2nd, 2004, Peter Jennings was giving the Person of the Week. They still do the Person of the Week on ABC News. And so on that date, he gave his Person of the Week was a man that probably most of us have never heard of. He's a man that had a big impact, and his name was Norman Borlaug. And you may say, Norman Borlaug. Who is Norman Borlaug? Well, Norman Borlaug was a scientist who went down to Mexico from the President Roosevelt's administration, and he started a lab there to try to create seed for wheat and corn that was hybridized so that it could withstand the arid, very dry climates. And he was successful with that. So you say, okay, so why did Norman become Person of the Week? Why did he get a Medal of Honor from President Bush? Why was he awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? Well, they decided that Norman Borlaug was responsible for saving 2 billion people. Think about that. 2 billion people were saved because of Norman Borlaug. So he saved 2 billion people, and what does he get? Person of the Week for ABC News. So what a great honor that he had there. Well, and so maybe it wasn't Norman Borlaug that saved those 2,000 people. Maybe it was Henry Wallace. Now, Henry Wallace was one of the vice presidents with Roosevelt. If you remember, Roosevelt had 4 terms. And, of course, we know Truman was one of his vice presidents. Well, one of them was Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace used to be the Secretary of Agriculture before he came on as vice president. And when he came on as the vice president, he used his influence to get an office in Mexico City that he chose Norman Borlaug to go to set up a lab to try to hybridize corn and wheat seed so that it would work in arid climates. So maybe it was Henry Wallace that should have been the person of the week. Maybe he's the one that saved the 2 billion people. Again, that butterfly effect. Or maybe it was George Washington Carver. We've heard of George Washington Carver. He's the one that, took the sweet potato and made 88 different ways that we can use the sweet potato. Or, as we know more, he took the peanut and made 266 applications with peanut oil and all kinds of other things. Again, I'm not a scientist. All I know is peanut butter. And so maybe it was George Washington Carver, because George Washington Carver was a student at Iowa State University. And when he was there at Iowa State University, his professor was so impressed with him that he wanted him to influence his son. So he went over to his house on weekends, and his professor would allow him to take his 6-year-old son out on botanical expeditions. So he would take him out, and he taught his son how botany was something that could be used for mankind. And who was the son? Henry Wallace, who ended up being Vice President of the United States. So maybe it was George Washington Carver that saved those 2 billion people. Or maybe it was this farmer in Diamond, Missouri. I passed by Diamond, Missouri about 3 weeks ago when I was coming up from Abilene, Texas, visiting my son, and it's just north of Joplin, Missouri. So Moses Carver lived there, and he was a farmer, and he lived there. It was in the 1860s. Missouri was a slave state, but Moses and his wife Susan did not believe in slavery, and so they had a farm, and there were some people that were not happy because he did not believe in slavery, and some of the psychopaths, like Quattrill's Raiders, came in one January night in 1864 and just burned his barns down, just really terrorized him, and burned all the animals except for one horse, one black horse. And so also kidnapped a mother and her son, and they went off into the night. Well, the mother was Mary Washington. Mary Washington had a son, and he was just a few months old. And so Susan was so determined, because she was good friends with Mary. And so she did some messaging and worked it out a couple days later for her husband Moses to meet up with Quattrill's Raiders over in Kansas. They met up late one night. It was about he took his horse overnight and met them up at a certain intersection in Kansas. And the Quattrill's Raiders came in. There was Moses, and he gives them he had to make a trade-off, and he gave him his only horse he had, and they threw him a dirty burlap sack. In that dirty burlap sack was a little boy. He was naked. So Moses took him out, put him in his clothes to keep him warm, and started walking back to the farm. Walked all night and most of the next day to take George Washington Carver back with him. And as he was going back, he would talk with him, and he promised him he was going to adopt him. He was going to adopt him. He was going to educate him. So maybe it was Moses Carver, the farmer in Diamond, Missouri, that saved those 2 billion people. Or maybe it was his wife. If I can get the next one here. There it is. I'll just have a tombstone for her. Maybe she's the one, because she worked out the arrangement for her husband to meet up with Quattrill's Raiders. Maybe she's the one that should have been the person of the week on ABC News, because maybe she's the one that saved those 2 billion people. Now, it's very interesting how this butterfly effect works. It's, and we can see examples in Scripture. And we can look in There we go. In John chapter 4, the woman at the well. Do you remember the woman at the well? She was one who, she met up with Jesus, and she was told about her past, and she was seeing that Jesus was the Messiah. And what did she do? She went back to her town, and that Jesus flapped his wings and gave her the gospel, that he was the way of life. He was the water of life, and she wouldn't thirst again. She goes back and says, I have found the Messiah, and the whole town believed. So the butterfly effect, how one little thing we do can make a big difference. Or Andrew. With Andrew in John chapter 1, Andrew he meets up with Jesus. And so what does Andrew do? He goes and he tells his brother. And we know the rest of the story there. He tells his brother Peter. And then Peter's the one we hear more about. He wrote several books in the New Testament. He's the one that he announced salvation to the Gentiles. And most of us in here are Gentiles. So he was the first one to announce that Jesus was salvation for us. Or in Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, who's the one that did preach the first sermon at Pentecost? It was Peter. So Andrew, he just flapped his wings. He goes and tells his brother, I found the Messiah, and look what has happened since then. Here's a picture. This is a picture of several of my high school buddies. Some of you might remember on the far left is Jeff Woods, and then John Woodruff, which was, if you remember, Jim Woodruff, the minister, his son, and then next to him is Jimmy Allen Jr., and some of you might remember some of the older generation, Jimmy Allen Sr., and then a guy, Paul Fike, and J.D. Yingling, and myself, the guy with the afro. We went up to Tabernacle, New Jersey, the summer of 1979, and we worked with the church there. We had 6 other ladies up there with us. We all were from Harding University, and we door knocked. We did VBS and all that stuff, and Johnny Woodruff, the guy with the Coke shirt on, he was door knocking one day, and nobody answered, and there was one of those big old horns as a decoration on the wall, on the door. One of those that goes, like something like that. And so he did that when they were leaving, thinking, this will be fun. And so then the people in the backyard, they heard that. So they came up to the front. They developed a kind of a relationship with them. They helped them with some things around the house, had Bible study with them, and God flapped his wings, his butterfly wings. And about 5 years ago, I was able to go up to Tabernacle, New Jersey in the summer. They were having their 100th anniversary for the church. And you'll see the Leichners there, though, on the older couple on the left. They became Christians. Then their 3 sons became Christians. The 3 sons married women who were Christians. And all, there's about, I think it was 19 that came to know God in a saving relationship because of that horn being honked. Again, the butterfly effect. And nothing we do for God is insignificant. God will take everything that we do and make it significant. And also during that summer, there was a girl there named Cheryl Baker. She then became a Christian that summer. She ended up going to Harding University, became a nurse, and for, I think, 25, 30 years, she teaches nursing at Harding. Again, God flapped his wings. And so tell them what will happen, what has happened with that. Here's one of my favorite stories here. This was a lady named Ruth Browning. Ruth Browning was a librarian at Harding Academy. My junior year of high school, I moved to Searcy and went to Harding Academy. Myself and a guy named Jeff Woods, we were both from St. Louis. We went there. There were no Christian academies in St. Louis during that time, during that period. So we go there, and we're there, and so then about 3 weeks into the new semester, we have roller skating. Okay, we went Sunday night for roller skating. Okay, and if you've been around the St. Louis area in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and up to 93, you know that in the St. Louis area, we had Ron's Roller World. The last Monday of the month, we went roller skating. Does anybody here remember that? Okay, yeah. My father was actually the one that organized it, so I went every time and loved it. And so Jeff Woods and I, we went every month from the time we were 4 or 5 years old until we went off to college. And they did one thing there called the hokey pokey. Okay, you do the hokey pokey, you turn yourself around, that's what, shake your, anyway. And so Jeff and I knew how to do the hokey pokey. And so we were doing the hokey pokey, and so, and everything's done, we get home. And so Monday morning, I go to school, and Ruth Browning was there at the skating party. She calls me into her office, and she says, Steve, I saw you skating, you're a good skater, she said, but I noticed during the hokey pokey, you were shaking your body just a little bit too much. And so I just kind of smiled. I said, okay, Miss Browning, I'll do better. I won't do that as much as I had been doing. So and I left and smiled, and about 3 months later, I got another call. I had to go into Ruth Browning's office. She was right off the library. I sit in her office, and she says, Steve, and I'm thinking, what did I do? She says, Steve, I have noticed these last 3 months that you're a leader. And she said, I want to encourage you to continue leading and just really leading for God. I'd never been called out to be a leader. And Ruth Browning, she flapped her wings and she challenged me to be a leader. And here I am today. And just, God used Ruth Browning, flapping her wing, just kind of what I call in youth ministry, whispering in a person's ear, saying, you can do this. And that's what she did. The butterfly effect, that's what she did there. Christian Family Services, I just want to encourage you, your support of Christian Family Services, you flapping your wings. There is no telling what God will do for the foster families here and the foster families from the past, Linda Burnett and some others here. What you did, what you do, you flapped your wing, and heaven's going to be pretty cool, Linda, when you get there, and you're going to see all those foster children that you loved, and you showed them God. And we know today from research the impact that loving a child will be. And it's just that butterfly effect is in God's kingdom is just incredible. And what you've done, Rattleburgers, the Ayers, and the V family, and many of you who have worked in foster care or who have sent checks to Christian Family Services, encouraged people that are doing social work, that are doing counseling at Christian Family Services or anywhere. There is no telling the impact you will have, and I don't know what heaven's going to be like, but I think part of that's going to be seeing some of that butterfly effect, the person that you talked with. I can't wait. Ruth Browning, the librarian, I told her the story later in life, and when she died about 2 years ago, I put that on Facebook as some of the students were honoring her, and I hope she understands the impact she had with just whispering in my ear, just flapping her wings. And there's no telling the impact you will have on people. Just the one baby up there, Isaiah. Okay, he's with a Christian family now, been adopted by them. Or here's another one, Madeline there with her family, and I'll never forget that moment. And as an executive director, many of my best moments on my job is carrying a little baby into a family that gets to see their forever child for the first time. And when we brought Madeline in, she said, and she just kept saying this, she was didn't know what else. She said, she's perfect. She's perfect. I knew she would be perfect. She's perfect. And she was a perfect fit because God put them two together as being a forever family. And the little girl there on the left, she was on our Timothy can about 3 or 4 years ago, just a sweet that's one of my favorite pictures there of children there. And then you've got a couple here from Kansas City. He's a fireman. And usually firemen take on a second job. So when we were meeting with them, during we had an adoption ceremony, somebody asked, so what is your other job that you have when you're not doing firework? And firework, you know what I mean. Yeah. And he said, it's just to be a dad. That's what I want to do. And it was just such a thrill to be able to, they ended up adopting 2 children, and just being a dad is what he wanted to do. And then here we have the Masons, who just an incredible story with them, and they just flapped their wings. They adopted 1 child, and then we called them again a year later and saying, your son has a biological brother. Would you like to adopt him? And they said, absolutely, with no hesitation. And then a year and a half later, said, your 2 sons have a sister, and we would love to keep siblings together. We asked them, and they said, absolutely. And I hope that we're having our virtual Vision of Hope night on September 17th. I'm wanting to have about a 5-minute segment with just that family. He does some fun stuff on Facebook, and it's a pretty cool thing. I'm hoping we'll be able to get something like that with them on Facebook on our virtual Vision of Hope night. But they flapped their wings and said yes, and there's no telling the impact on eternity when they have said yes. And again, another one of this last picture is this picture. There's so many stories there that I could tell about what happened there. You had a couple that they could not have children, so they adopted. 3 months after they adopted, she got pregnant, and then about a year and a half later, the child they adopted had a brother, and so they said yes to that too. And so the foster family there, they were fostering the child that they adopted, but then the child that they have in their arms, he was a foster child, and the mom was here from Mexico, and she had been raped by the person that brought her here, had a child, and I was talking with we had a small group that would come every April to help us with our prayer garden. And he came up and he called me the Wednesday before they were supposed to come. He said, Steve, do you know what I do for a living? I said, you're some kind of investigator. He said, well, I work for Homeland Security, and I've kind of connected some dots, and I'm working with the FBI, and so I need to talk with you about one of your foster children. And it was a case with some sex trafficking and some stuff with the mother and all that. It got real complicated. I said, well, I can't talk with you without a subpoena from a judge. And so got that. The next morning they were there and talking with them, and it was a great story of an unfortunate situation. But the little boy ended up going to state custody, but stayed with one of our foster families, and they ended up adopting him. And then we found out that the mom was safe back in Mexico, and they were afraid that she had been killed. But it was in that one story, that one picture there are so many stories of flapping our wings and God taking it and making it into an incredible story for his kingdom. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will harvest if we do not give up. I just want to encourage you, as a church, as a family, and as individuals, don't give up in doing good, because nothing at all that we do is insignificant. Everything we do, God sees, and he will take it and make something big out of it. It may not be saving 2 billion people and getting person of the week, but as Christians, we don't need that. We know we're called to do good. And in this pandemic, it's a lot of opportunity for us to do good. And whether there's a pandemic or not, God calls us to always do good. And I want to encourage you to do that. And again, don't become weary in doing good. Now, we're becoming weary, with the whole pandemic. It's weary for all of us. But let's just remember, God's going to take any little thing we do, and he's going to bless it. He is going to bless it. The butterfly effect is powerful. It's a powerful theory, not in the science realm, but in the kingdom realm. And when we can continue to do good, God is going to bless it. Thank you for letting me be here. I've enjoyed being here with you. Hopefully you'll see information about our virtual Vision of Hope night that we'll have in place of our dinner. And it's last year we did it, and it was just, God just really blessed it. And again, this year, September 17th, we'll have that. Again, thank you so much. And don't forget, God will bless you with every good thing that you do. So if anybody has any prayers that you need from the leadership here, if anybody has been affected by that butterfly effect, you've been influenced by somebody who did something good for you, and you see that good came from God, and you want to dedicate your life to Jesus, we're prepared for you to do that here today. So if you have any needs, we'd encourage you to come forward as we stand and sing.